We've all been through that phase in high school where pride got the best of us. You know when you like someone but you'd rather chew on broken glass than swallow your pride and admit it out loud? In most American rom-coms, like Mean Girls or 10 Things I Hate About You, we usually follow that cliche game of cat and mouse, where the couple ends up giving in way too easily. But what if we took your average teen romance and mashed it up with the insane psychological warfare of a Death Note? That's the exact stroke of genius we find in the anime we're dissecting today, Kaguya-Sama. The story introduces us to a billionaire heiress and a broke student council president, two geniuses who are head over heels for each other, but have egos so massive that they turn any attempt at flirting into the most chaotic and hilarious Cold War imaginable. Their philosophy is simple. In love, the first one to confess loses. And let me tell you, this show completely nails its characters, the absurd tactics, and that sheer desperation of trying to hide the most obvious feelings in the world. That's why today on the channel, Kaguya-Sama, the comedy that elevated romantic stubbornness to a combat sport. We are introduced to the prestigious Shuchin Academy, a silver spoon haven for the country's most elite and snobby heirs. Here, we meet the two student council leaders whose egos are bigger than the planet itself. The filthy rich vice president Kaguya and the working class president Miyuki are secretly head over heels for each other. However, they would rather eat radioactive waste than confess first, each waiting for the other to crawl to them and beg for a relationship. Half a year drags on in this Cold War of idiots until the chaotic secretary Chika drops the ultimate bait on the table: 2 tickets to a romantic movie. Legend has it that anyone who watches this film together is destined to become a couple. Miyuki nearly falls into the trap of asking Kaguya out, but he senses the danger and tries to flip the script. Kaguya, who obviously orchestrated the whole thing, activates her innocent girl persona and silently demands a passionate invitation, causing the president's brain to completely short-circuit. Desperate for a sugar rush to process the panic, the two engage in a fierce mental battle over a single sweet bun. But Chika simply swallows the pastry whole and heads off to class, forcing a technical tie right in the faces of the two frustrated geniuses. Shortly after, Kaguya waves a love letter in Miyuki's face. She bluffs about accepting a date with some random background character just to goad the president into stopping her. Miyuki tries to flex his authority like a power-tripping Discord mod to forbid the date, but Kaguya doubles down, claiming she'll surrender her body and soul to this total stranger. The duel escalates to catastrophic proportions until Chika bursts into desperate tears, hugging Kaguya and begging her not to get expelled for dating. This completely ruins the bluff and secures a humiliating defeat for the vice president. Later on, Kaguya finds herself secretly drooling over the octopus wiener in Miyuki's homemade bento, but her colossal pride prevents her from just asking for a bite. Shameless as ever, Chika snatches the president's food and praises how good it tastes. Meanwhile, Kaguya shoots them both a demonic glare, which Miyuki misinterprets as pure disgust for peasant food. The following day, the rich heiress brings a luxurious banquet to force a bento exchange. However, the murderous aura radiating from her is so intense that Miyuki inhales his food at the speed of light and flees the room like a coward. Kaguya is left absolutely mortified, only to be consoled by the very same person who ruined her life the day before. Our penny-pinching president finally leaves the Stone Age and buys a smartphone, exchanging contacts with the chaotic Chika in hopes that Kaguya will do the same. But since the egos of these two are bigger than your forehead, neither wants to be the first to ask for the other's number and lose face. In a desperate play, Miyuki uses a humiliating childhood photo as his profile picture for bait, announcing he'll delete it in 3 minutes. Kaguya resorts to crocodile tears just to make him show her his screen, swallowing the trap hook, line, and sinker. But all that mental gymnastics goes down the drain when Chika reveals that Kaguya's phone is a prehistoric flip phone relic, resulting in a pathetic draw. With the cold weather approaching, Chika rubs it in their faces that time flies and they've accomplished absolutely nothing in their empty lives, crushing the duo's souls. She proposes a summer trip, sparking a deadly debate where Miyuki prefers the wilderness of the mountains, and Kaguya wants to drag everyone to the beach. Kaguya was about to wipe the floor with his arguments until Chika confesses she needs a new bikini because her massive bust just won't stop growing. This statement hits the ironing board of a vice president like a bazooka shot to her own flat chest. Utterly humiliated, they let the secretary decide the final destination, vacation, but the girl chooses a mountain so bizarre and macabre that it completely torches their travel plans. Later, an extra named Tsubasa begs Miyuki for love advice. The president puffs out his chest to act like a modern Casanova, hiding the minor detail that he's as virgin as extra virgin olive oil, while Kaguya hides to eavesdrop on this masterclass. Tsubasa reports having trouble with his crush, Nagisa, and Miyuki uses absurd logic to convince the kid that she and all her friends are fiercely thirsty for him. Deluded, Tsubasa praises the president for having already conquered Kaguya, making Miyuki freak out and spew a laundry list of the girl's most annoying flaws. Kaguya listens to everything, ready to commit murder, but Miyuki senses her presence and lies through his teeth, saying he loves those exact same flaws.
She's so stinking perfect, I can barely believe she's real! That's right, between you and me, she knew me as everything I want in a girl!
Tsubasa follows the advice, gets a girlfriend, and leaves Miyuki to suffer a crushing defeat. Though he does get the bonus of being treated exceptionally well by a terrifyingly smiley Kaguya. The student council comes across a confiscated magazine, revealing that 34% of teenagers have already done the deed, leaving Chika in shock and our blonde president sweating bullets. But Kaguya, the untouchable genius, drops the bombshell that the percentage seems low and that she herself is no longer a virgin, causing the two of them to completely short-circuit. Wanting to corner Miyuki, she asks if he's ever done it. Our proud virgin tries to bluff and says yes. Kaguya makes a series of clueless remarks, and Miyuki, realizing he's dealing with a complete lunatic, asks what the hell she thinks a first time actually is. The millionaire heiress answers with all the confidence in the world that it's just a little kiss. Chika is then forced to drag Kaguya into a corner and give the rich girl an explicit biology lesson, securing yet another humiliating defeat. Later, the couple with communication dysfunction decides to play 20 questions to test how well Miyuki knows the vice president. As the hints pile up, Miyuki's ego inflates, thinking the answer is himself. But remembering he's playing against a romance psychopath, he activates his remaining brain cells and gives the right answer, revealing that she was describing a dog the whole time, making it out of the room unscathed. The next day, a cat stuck in the engine of Kaguya's fancy car forces the preppy rich girl to use her own 2 feet. Being the manipulative strategist she is, she calculates the perfect route to intercept the president's bicycle. The plan goes in the trash when she bumps into a lost kid named Mikiti and gets dragged into helping the brat cross the street. While she wastes her time playing babysitter, Miyuki shows up, ruining the mood to scold her for being late. Fortunately, he makes up for the trauma by offering her a ride on the back of his sweaty bike, allowing the heiress to finally feel the wind in her face before returning to her luxury ride in the following days, watching the peasants travel on foot. Since the French exchange students are arriving at the school, the board decides to throw a cosplay party. Kaguya puts on cat ears and our president swallows hard, trying to hide his extreme arousal with a serial killer stare that scares off the useless Chika. Out for revenge, Kaguya shoves the ears onto Miyuki and nearly has a stroke holding back her smile, biting her tongue so she won't confess she loved it. Except the president's paranoid mind makes him swear she's being sarcastic and plotting his destruction. Kaguya demands to take a picture. Miyuki panics fearing future extortion, and chaos ensues until Chika confiscates the plush accessory like a daycare babysitter. Needing to buy sweets for the event, the emotionally stunted genius duo uses the forbidden word game to decide who will have the displeasure of the task. Chika starts dropping a rap that destroys any remaining trace of human decency, while Kaguya adopts the cowardly tactic of absolute silence. Miyuki decides to play dirty and psychologically attacks the secretary by asking what she hates most. This causes the girl to have an emotional breakdown as she remembers everyone thinks she's a clueless airhead. Moved by the pathetic display, Kaguya blurts out her forbidden word and loses miserably. Miyuki, smelling success, announces that now he's going to get serious, instantly triggering his exact forbidden word. He secures the solo outing with her he so desperately wanted, but throws his own ego in the trash. Later, under pressure from her maid, Kaguya finally gets her act together and calls Miyuki.
I did the hard part.
I'm not mentally prepared, though!
Hello?
Hello, it's Shinomiya.
The one who picks up is his old man being an absolute deadbeat parasite until he passes the phone to his son, who decides to take the call all wet and sweaty from inside the bathtub. They set up the date, but the next day, a storm pours from the sky, making it blatantly obvious that the universe despises them both. Kaguya gets stuck at home and spends half an hour crying while typing out a cancellation, while the idiot Miyuki waits at the meeting spot, getting drenched in the rain like a stray dog, smiling as if he'd just won the war. At the party, the arrogant Miyuki tries to play the intellectual by pretending to know French just because he skimmed through a cheap dictionary, only to get hit with a reality check upon discovering that both Kaguya and the useless Chika are completely fluent. The sadistic principal takes advantage of his ignorance and unleashes a student named Betsy to obliterate the boy with a bombardment of foreign insults. But since Miyuki has the situational awareness of a doorknob, he just keeps smiling and nodding. Refusing to see her man degraded, Kaguya emerges from the shadows and humiliates the foreigner with French so heavy and lethal that the poor girl runs away crying, traumatized for the rest of her academic life. Nagisa pops into the student council looking for relationship advice because she wants to dump her boyfriend, proving that teenagers just like you have no idea what they want out of life. Our rich and completely inexperienced virgin vice president decides to play couples therapist just to prove she can do it better than the president. When Kaguya tells the girl to list her boyfriend's qualities, she accidentally ends up describing the president and gets all sweaty imagining him. Suddenly, the chaotic secretary busts onto the scene dressed as a love detective and tells them to imagine their respective romantic targets with other women. Kaguya short-circuits with jealousy and suggests the Romeo and Juliet effect, claiming the couple needs an obstacle. The pink-haired secretary decrees that the real enemy is society, and Nagisa runs off super motivated to fight the system. In the end, the grand revolution against society was just asking for donations on the street alongside some kids and the president, adding yet another depressing defeat to Kaguya's tally. Shortly after, we find the president alone on the court trying to play volleyball, but his motor coordination is worse than a deflated, wacky, waving inflatable tube man. The secretary spawns out of nowhere and catches the supreme leader embarrassing himself. Trying to save his own glass ego, he accepts her help. But when the academic genius tries to serve, he simply closes his eyes and beats up the air, making the girl question human evolution. They enter a rigorous 4-day training montage worthy of a martial arts movie just for him to learn how to hit the balls properly. After a lot of sweat and absurd humiliation, he finally learns how to serve, but the secretary points out she still needs to teach him how to receive them too. A week later, the president is dominating the court with godlike skill, while the secretary cries with pride in the corner, looking like a single mother who finally saw her son succeed in life. When a storm pours outside, our elitist protagonist sabotages her own driver just to create the perfect cliché movie scenario. Both of them have umbrellas hidden, but they lie through their teeth in a psychological game of chess to force the other to offer shelter first and avoid getting wet. The Battle of Bluffs reaches its climax, and Kaguya prepares the checkmate. But since the universe hates this girl, the Secretary of Chaos appears out of thin air and shoves an extra umbrella into her hand, imploding her foolproof plan. With her dignity crushed, Kaguya and the president reach a weird compromise and end up sharing the same handle in the rain, ending this circus with a pathetic tie. We meet our new favorite punching bag, the depressive treasurer Yu Ishigami, begging President Miyuki to accept his resignation. The reason? He's absolutely certain Kaguya is going to slice him up like a Christmas ham. After ruining her schemes a few times, the kid even calculated that Chika has at most 2 months to live before Kaguya's death glares turn her into fertilizer. Proving that the universe hates the treasurer, Kaguya suddenly appears in the room covered head to toe in blood and holding a knife. As if Ishigami's impending heart attack wasn't enough, Chika bursts into the room with a blade shoved through her own chest. It was all just a silly prank by the drama club.
President, Ishigami's with you, isn't he?
But while Miyuki tries to play the anime hero speechifying about trust, Kaguya corners the treasurer in the shadows and threatens to destroy his soul if he dares leave the council. Giving them no rest, Chika decides to torture the gang with a personality test from a sketchy book. Right off the bat, the president reveals his bizarre desire to have 9 kids. On the next question about love interests, Ishigami accidentally answers Kaguya's name, making the girl inflate her own ego thinking he desires her. But the real freak show happens when Miyuki answers with his own sister's name, instantly earning him the creepy siscon label. Traumatized by his own embarrassment, Ishigami flees to find a hospital. Chika then resorts to an internet test about showing love by giving flowers. While Kaguya chooses a basic bouquet, the peanut brain president says he'd send a whole truckload of weeds, losing the round in a completely humiliating fashion. The next day, the maid Ai invades the student council to paint her wealthy mistress's nails. Kaguya spends the day waving her polished claws in the president's face, begging for validation. Miyuki notices the shine but suffers a mental collapse, terrified of saying anything that might come across the wrong way if he compliments her appearance. To make the tension in the room worse, Ishigami reaches the pinnacle of scaring off women by sniffing Chika's hair and whispering that she smells like a baby. The girl feels profound disgust and kicks the boy out, who sneaks away just wanting to unalive himself. Terrified by the violent rejection he just witnessed, Miyuki tries to stop Kaguya at the school gate to finally compliment her nails, but stutters and chokes on his own words just like you trying to flirt. Kaguya takes the win home while the president sinks into his own cowardice. The Supreme Virgin Miyuki is once again bothered by the desperate Tsubasa, who now wants to commit the greatest act of human indecency, holding his own girlfriend's hand. Kaguya activates her classic stalker mode and eavesdrops on everything through the walls. Miyuki, pretending to be the master of romance when his only practical experience is with his own fist, recommends the kid rent a boat. Since the boy is just as broke as you are, the president tells him to get a job. Tsubasa cries, saying his hands sweat too much, and the newly graduated Dr. Miyuki diagnoses him with a rare disease that requires incredibly expensive surgery, ordering the boy to work all summer to pay for it. The delusion is interrupted by Chika, who uses her street smarts to tell the boy to just grab the girl's hand without a second thought. Tsubasa obeys, achieves the sacred touch, and Miyuki swallows yet another humiliating defeat. With no time to breathe, the depressed Ishigami pours all his hatred into the budget review, proposing tyrannical budget cuts against any club where the guys have girlfriends. Miyuki tries to salvage the kid's sanity by suggesting he join a club too, but as soon as Ishigami makes the lethal mistake of mocking Kaguya's club, he gets punished by Chika and psychologically massacred by the vice president, crawling out of the room with a shattered soul. Taking advantage of the power vacuum, the pink demon tries to increase her own club's budget, and when Miyuki refuses, she tries to force the president to join her. Kaguya goes into territorial defense mode, initiating a tug of war against Chika. In the end, Miyuki is crowned the winner of the round, simply for being the most highly contested piece of meat on the market. The last shred of the council's dignity dies completely when Chika tells innocent stories about her dog, until she drops the forbidden word, wiener. Kaguya's Puritan brain suffers a stroke, causing her to spit fluids everywhere because her dirty mind can't handle the double entendre.
Hey, Sue's wiener trick! But then he has this really weird wiener! It's hard to explain.
Realizing this pathetic weakness, Chika decides to torture the vice president. As soon as Miyuki enters the room, the secretary attempts pure social engineering to force the president to take the bait and say the word wiener. Kaguya blocks every attempt in a sweaty panic until Chika loses her patience, screams the cursed word at the top of her lungs, and Miyuki runs away terrified, believing he's trapped in a room with two starved nymphomaniacs. The victory obviously goes to Chaos. The president's little sister, Kei, invades the student council room, and Kaguya immediately goes into psychopathic manipulator mode with a single insane goal, making the girl call her big sister. When Kei asks for help with some paperwork, Kaguya tries to suck up to the poor girl in every possible way to score points, but the useless, depressed Ishigami sabotages her plan by opening his mouth to give genuinely good advice. As if the humiliation weren't enough, the pest that is Chika spawns in the room, striking a bizarre friendship pose with the visitor, rubbing it in everyone's faces that the two are already super close. The fatal blow to the vice president's soul comes when Kei calls Chika big sis, causing Kaguya to spontaneously combust from pure jealousy. She only pockets her metaphorical knife and goes back to smiling like an idiot when she's also invited to hang out at the mall with them. Even so, defeat is guaranteed, as Kei confesses to her brother that she felt creeped out by the weird rich girl. Right after, the hell that is finals approaches, and Miyuki and Kaguya start a cold war of lies. They both pretend they haven't studied at all, bluffing with the same shamelessness you use to tell your mom you already cleaned your room. At the end of this duel of deception, the sadistic president maintains his throne as the supreme nerd, crushing the scoreboard, while the geniuses fight at the top. The total failure, Ishigami discovers he's at risk of being held back a year because of his depressing grades. To prevent the council from embarrassing itself, Kaguya kidnaps the guy and forces him to eat, sleep, and breathe books. The poor guy tries to escape this academic captivity countless times, failing miserably every single one. On the 5th day of library torture, they even share a touching moment, making Ishigami think that maybe Kaguya isn't literal Satan with a hair ribbon. That pathetic illusion shatters the moment he scores a measly 41% on the exam, scraping the bottom of the barrel just barely enough to not fail, causing the vice president to flip out in a rage and annihilate whatever little dignity he had left. A storm paralyzes the trains, causing Chika to freak out, terrified that the Thunder God will steal her belly button since her brain has clearly already been stolen. Since our blue-collar president doesn't own a car, Kaguya sees the perfect chance to stuff him into her limo and have the vehicular date of her dreams. Chika tries to ruin everything by offering to share a taxi, but Kaguya banishes the pink nuisance from the school, fueled by pure hatred. To force the boy to beg for a ride, the vice president uses psychological terrorism about how missing work would destroy his status in society. When the trains magically start running again, Kaguya invokes her ninja skills and swaps the president's phone battery for a dead one in under a minute, proving that billionaires have way too much free time. She waits in the rain with an evil smirk, forcing her poor maid Ai to walk back home. Ai curses that karma never misses, and sure enough, it hits. The president flies by on his bike, splashing dirty water right in his boss's face, who catches a brutal cold and turns into a giant crybaby. With the madam bedridden, the council needs to deliver documents to her. Chika warns them that Kaguya turns into a needy baby when she's sick, activating the most degenerate fantasies in the president's mind, who instantly pictures the girl scrubbing his back. The cowardly treasurer tries to bail on the mission out of pure terror of the heiress, so Chika suggests a game of concentration to decide who goes.
The person who gets to go will be the one who wins concentrations. And if anyone's caught cheating, that's an automatic 5-point deduction. Got it?
Okay.
The secretary shamelessly tries to cheat using marked cards, but our president spots the fraud and slaps her with a penalty. When the treasurer accidentally reveals that Kaguya got sick from a puddle splash, the president connects the dots, realizes his own stupidity, and goes full try-hard mode. He destroys Chika's second dirty tactic of reading the angles of the cards and wins the game. The treasurer then humiliates the corrupt secretary down to her very soul, making her cry and steal his famous catchphrase about wanting to go home and die. The president arrives at the gigantic mansion and drools over the disguised maid before getting tossed into the sick girl's room. Ai warns him that her lady's brain has been melted by the fever, acting like an airhead who won't remember anything tomorrow, and bounces from the room, demanding he not commit any atrocities. When the boy tries to ask if her cold was his fault, Kaguya simply yanks the kid into her bed, begging to sleep cuddled up together. Faced with the greatest temptation of his mediocre life, our hero uses all of his energy not to commit a crime and ends up passing out from sheer exhaustion. Hours later, Kaguya wakes up, freaks out at the sight of a male in her bed, and violently kicks the president out of the house, while he runs down the street crying that he spent absolutely all of his self-control not to smash the heiress right then and there. With an atmosphere heavier than your computer's search history after that fateful night in Kaguya's bed, our proudly sexually frustrated couple enters a deadly war for the last slice of strawberry shortcake. The cheapskate principal only sent 2 slices to the council, and since the depressed edgelord Ishigami already devoured one, they're left with the task of forcing the other to swallow the moist, creamy, whipped cream-filled slice to assert absolute dominance. The murderous tension makes the emo kid flee in desperation to summon the Secretary of Chaos, hoping she can mediate the conflict. Chika arrives, assesses their petty bullshit, opens her mouth, and simply swallows the whole dessert in one go, warning them that if they're going to act like children, nobody gets to put anything in their mouths, leaving the 2 idiots completely empty-handed. With her pride wounded and blood sugar low, the bougie girl goes to whine for relationship advice from the experienced Nagisa, while our president begs for salvation from Ishigami, whose only experience with females boils down to devouring rom-com manga of questionable quality. Surprisingly, both half-assed advisors say that nobody is to blame for the previous fiasco. The 2 dysfunctional lovebirds bump into each other in the school hallway and decide to bury the hatchet in the most socially awkward way possible. Soon after, summer vacation vacation is knocking at the door, and Miyuki tries to manipulate Chika into forcing a cheap trip close to home. The plan fails miserably because the pink girl has already booked flights to blow oceans of cash in Hawaii and Spain. Ishigami then drops the brilliant idea of going to the town's summer festival, making Chika realize she'll be clogging her arteries with paella in Europe on that exact date. She demands everyone cancel the hangout, but the treasurer throws it in her face that this is pure selfishness. The pink creature throws a deafening temper tantrum and runs out crying. Ishigami is devastated, thinking he ruined everything, and tries to flee the country, but Kaguya and Miyuki intercept the boy just to intensely thank him for his heroic sacrifice in purging the embodiment of chaos from that room. Half of summer vacation has already gone down the drain, and our president spends his days rotting in his own bedroom. But the stalker vice president discovers the existence of his Twitter, proving to have the technological prowess of a Neanderthal by thinking she broke the internet while trying to create her own profile. Desperate, she invades her own maid's bath, demanding tech support, while poor Ai just wanted to scrub her own body in peace. After receiving a basic tutorial, Ai is dragged back to hell just because her boss chokes on her own massive ego, refusing to press the damn follow button and praying the president makes the first move.
Just standing around wet and half naked.
I'm sorry.
If it's too hard.
Meanwhile, the chaotic secretary returns from abroad straight into a ramen shop, where a random old guy takes soup tasting more seriously than life itself. He orders the perfect combo, but goes into absolute shock when Chika orders the exact same thing. The veteran spends his entire screen time watching the girl devour the dish using the mini ramen technique, feeling she possesses the spirit of an ancestral master. Inspired by her aggressive slurping of hot noodles down to the last drop, the old man gives her a thumbs up of approval, leaving the girl completely confused while she wins an imaginary battle. Back to the duo of lovesick cowards. They both spend their days crying in the corners over their lack of contact, being too proud to send a simple text message. Tired of suffering exactly like you do when you get left on red, they both leave the house. The president lies to his sister, saying he's going to buy food, and sprints to the student council, but arrives just too late to sniff the chair where Kaguya was, since the girl bounced from the place a second before he walked in. To make the vice president's life worse, her hangout with her friends is cancelled when she is dragged to Kyoto by her wealthy family. Her father barely breathes in his daughter's direction, triggering depressing flashbacks of a past where Kaguya was treated like a useless potted plant. But the drama lasts less than your paycheck, because as soon as she sets foot back in Tokyo, the girl throws her trauma in the trash and goes back to smiling, desperate to finally see everyone at the fireworks festival the next day. The proud rich girl finally gets dressed up for the summer festival, ready to meet the student council, but her plans go down the drain when one of her retainers grounds the girl at home like a 5-year-old child. Isolated in her room, Kaguya resorts to the ultimate weapon of the frustrated, and goes to whine on Twitter. Miyuki takes one look at the digital drama, hops on his bike, and starts pedaling as if he were running from the IRS. Meanwhile, the maid Ai decides she's had enough of the crying, helps her boss escape house arrest, and takes her place in bed as a cheap body double. Miyuki arrives at the mansion sweating like a pig, only to find the bootleg version of Kaguya, gets the message, and bolts to the festival, while the depressed Ishigami simply ditches Chika in the middle of the crowd to look for the missing girl. Stuck in a taxi in the middle of hellish traffic, Kaguya hears from the driver that the fireworks are already over. She throws elegance out the window, runs on foot, but misses the show anyway and starts sobbing in the dark, just like you do when you open your credit card bill. But Miyuki emerges from the shadows to save the day, crams all 4 of them into a cab, and they flee to Chiba, where the rain delayed another festival, allowing these idiots to watch the brilliant explosions squeezed inside the car. The semester restarts, but the vice president decides to completely ignore the blonde boy's existence. Miyuki burns his last remaining brain cells, thinking she's dying of embarrassment. The two try to make small talk by pretending to clean the council room in a pathetic mating dance that leads nowhere. The tension gets so unbearable that they simply kick Ishigami and Chika out of the room. Finally alone, the two weirdos clash and the conversation flows. But since their intelligence is inversely proportional to their social skills, Miyuki misreads all the signals, panics, and flees the room completely embarrassed. The screen declares Kaguya's crushing victory as she runs after him to continue this endless psychological torture. The blonde maid infiltrates the student council to commit the perfect crime of swapping the president's coffee for decaf. As soon as he chugs the drink, his system shuts down like Windows 98, and his head drops onto Kaguya's shoulder. She screams. The maid breaches the room, but is ordered to lock the place down and bar anyone from entering. Hayasaka turns into a bouncer, turning everyone away, and when she checks back on the situation, the two useless dorks are still frozen in the exact same position. Soon after, the kid who was previously asking for relationship advice reappears looking like a boy band extra, complete with an earring, new hair, and a heartthrob attitude.
Romantic advice?
Yeah, man. You're like an expert. A true blue modern-day Casanova with all sorts of tips and tricks to woo the ladies.
Ishigami gets so triggered by this posing that he plans to mummify the poor bastard using toilet paper. When the wannabe delinquent's girlfriend arrives, Ishigami and the president pretend to leave, but stay behind to spy on everything through the crack in the door. Kaguya and Chika join the surveillance operation and catch the couple swapping spit and aggressively making out on the neck. The president applies his love math, stating that the home run always happens on the 5th date, causing Kaguya to have a heart attack and collapse on the floor. In the end, the girl reveals the two were just faking it to troll the council virgins. Craving more attention, the walking pink bubblegum known as Chika forces everyone to play her homemade board game. The match is pure chaos. Ishigami is hit by a car and dies prematurely, just like his will to live. Kaguya becomes a billionaire rolling in cash, while Chika marries the president and pops out 9 kids into the world before asking for a divorce. The president even tries to marry Kaguya in the game, but she pulls a male distrust card and ends up marrying Chika herself. Later, Kaguya panics upon remembering that the president's birthday is in 4 days, since she once swore she would never celebrate the date. Using a fortune-telling app from Chika that requires birth dates, Kaguya tries to subtly extract the information from him. The president puts his foot down and refuses, getting completely stressed out remembering her cruel old promise. Immediately, Kaguya's lovesick brain does a backflip and concludes that he is only refusing because he wants an exclusive party planned by her. With her delusion fully restored, she skips out of the room, overflowing with joy. Kaguya drags the chaotic secretary, the president's sister, and another irrelevant girl to the mall, planning to extract state secrets about the Shirogane family's gift traditions. But since the universe hates our heiress, she gets isolated with the irrelevant girl while the secretary steals all of Kei's attention. When Kaguya gives up and goes to sit on a bench outside, Kei miraculously sits next to her, trying to force absurd intimacy. Kaguya calls the girl little sister, getting a reality check to just use her first name. Kei then exposes her own family's misery, revealing that the gifts are just bookstore gift cards, but calls out the president for secretly slipping her cash on her birthdays and playing dumb afterward. Suddenly, a kid trips on the street, and Kei hits the pavement, saving the brat and sacrificing a freshly bought handkerchief with water to clean the wound. Kaguya is completely mesmerized, realizing the girl is a perfect genetic clone of the president, feeling like she's on a romantic date with him. Back home, the blonde maid ties a ribbon around Kaguya herself, suggesting she offer her wrapped body as a present for the president to unwrap, earning a colossal scolding from her boss. The next day, the sociopathic heiress presents a custom cake so terrifying that her maid instantly calls her an idiot. In the council room, Kaguya has a schizophrenic breakdown with imaginary lawyers in her own head to decide whether to hand over the sugary abomination. She turns off the lights, tells the president to close his eyes, and shoves a slice of cake and a calligraphy fan at him before running away like a fugitive from the law. Believing he finally won the game, Miyuki is cornered when the pink-haired secretary notices the fan. Trying to play the hero, he says a friend gave it to him. Immediately, the secretary accuses him of loving Kaguya, revealing that the girl herself orchestrated this dirty trap. But Miyuki activates his defensive mode and exposes that Kaguya dug through the council records a year ago just to stalk his birthday. Kaguya's brain melts, admiring the president using the fan, but Ishigami enters the room praising the pen he himself gave Miyuki. Realizing that only the pink-haired secretary didn't know about the birthday, the emo kid humiliates the girl until she runs down the hallways crying. Kaguya mentally thanks the depressed emo, proving he's the true secret weapon of this school. Miyuki drags the entire council to the roof in the middle of the night with the excuse of stargazing. Capitalizing on this being one of the group's last moments before the dissolution, Kaguya sees the perfect opportunity to pounce.
Ambiance. I can use that to my advantage and make the president confess.
She ships the chaotic secretary and the depressed treasurer off to some random corner and focuses on torturing the president. She asks for his jacket and offers him a sip of her hot tea, expecting him to panic at the insinuation of swallowing her fluids from the same cup. But Miyuki's brain has been completely melted by the moon. He downs the drink without blinking, pulls the girl against his chest, and drops an absurdly cheesy pickup line, saying he would never give up on her, and would go all the way to the moon to get Princess Kaguya, no matter the cost of lives. The level of secondhand embarrassment is so radioactive that the rich girl simply flees the roof, leaving the blonde alone to suffer from chronic regret the next day. The inevitable happens, and the 67th Student Council is officially dissolved. The crew cleans the room, finds nostalgic garbage hidden in the drawers, including the famous Forbidden magazine, and cries while saying goodbye to an empty room exactly like extras in a soap opera drama. To celebrate, they go get wasted on soda at a family restaurant. Miyuki rips off his golden aiguillette, losing his official title. This throws Kaguya into a mental breakdown, since she can no longer call him president, and using his real name is basically a crime against her own dignity. While the pink-haired girl and the emo use nicknames and the blonde's real name casually, Kaguya suffers in silence. She even tries to play the martyr at the drink machine, saying it would be selfish to force the boy to run again after so much slave labor. But emotional dependency speaks louder. When Miyuki drops her off at her door, Kaguya finally breaks and begs him to take the job for another year. Exactly like the cheap manipulator he is, Miyuki smiles and reveals he already had the application form filled out, merely holding the paper hostage until the rich girl humbled herself and asked. A perfect bluff, since the coward would never turn in the application if she didn't beg first. Kaguya decides to test the blonde simp's loyalty by sending her own maid to seduce the boy. Ayasaka bumps into Miyuki at a bookstore, pulls out a tech magazine, and drags the poor guy to a diner pretending to need IT support, treating the president like a customer service rep. The bougie girl spies from the corners, while Hayasaka fakes passing out for 3 hours straight. Miyuki spends the entire afternoon poking the girl to try and wake her up, proving that his stubbornness is only matched by his eye bags. When the blonde actress finally opens her eyes and hits him with the line that he could have just left, the idiot drops a white knight speech saying he would never abandon a defenseless girl. Taking advantage of the opening, Hayasaka drops the invitation for a date, but takes a monumental rejection straight to the chin because Miyuki confesses he already has his eyes on a certain someone. The maid gets completely pissed off by the rejection, directing all her pent-up fury straight at her boss. With the election knocking at the door, Miyuki needs Kaguya to handle the campaign speeches, but the coward is shaking in his boots and can't get her out of the room. Hayasaka loses patience with everyone's sluggishness, walks to the door, and announces the summon. The entire class goes into a collective delusion, thinking the dating confession is finally going to happen, sticking to the walls like a bunch of gossiping geckos to eavesdrop. But to the nation's dismay, Miyuki drops a strictly bureaucratic request Kaguya accepts with a smile on her face, and the entire school chases after them, desperate for any crumb of romance. Peace is completely shattered when Miko Ino appears on the school horizon. The tiny dictator kicks the door down, picking a fight with Miyuki and Ishigami, before committing the worst strategic mistake in human history by asking the chaotic Chika to be her future vice president. Miko puffs out her chest, guaranteeing she'll crush Miyuki in the election, but when the president checks the candidate's flyer, he realizes her government plan is a schizophrenic compilation of absurdly strict rules that will make the students hate her existence for the rest of their lives.
Just read the flyer. Shaved head.
Free from the bureaucratic hell of the student council, our phony president finally gets a decent night's sleep and loses that chronic serial killer glare. The shock is so brutal that Chika and Ishigami almost have a stroke seeing his new rested face. Emitting the aura of a wholesome cereal box mascot, the school's background characters finally lose their fear and start striking up conversations, making Miyuki think he can use this cheap charm to seduce Kaguya. He flashes his best magnetic looks, but the girl ignores his existence, while internally having a nervous breakdown because she is completely sick in the head and prefers 1,000 times over the psychopath face he had before. Desperate over the change, Kaguya runs to get advice from Nagisa, who instantly figures out the target's identity, but when the preppy girl plays the true love card, Nagisa loses her composure at the level of secondhand embarrassment. Out of nowhere, Chika sprouts from the ground to vomit her unsolicited opinion that love based on looks is a complete sham, skipping away happily right after. her. To make Kaguya's existential crisis worse, Ishigami goes into nihilist mode, claiming true love doesn't exist in the modern era, forcing Nagisa to do mental gymnastics to console the vice president. During the morning assembly, Chika catches the president merely lip-syncing the anthem like a fifth-rate TikToker. When he confesses to lacking a single ounce of vocal talent, the secretary gets war flashbacks to their volleyball training, but her musical pride speaks louder. The mentoring turns into instant torture when she hears the demonic noises coming out of his throat, forcing Miyuki to reveal his childhood trauma, where people begged him to keep his trap shut so as not to ruin the school choir. The sad story melts the secretary's heart, and she trains the boy relentlessly until he belts out his voice in the courtyard, making Chika cry rivers of tears like a proud mother. Later, Hayasaka delivers a dossier on the newbie Miko Ino, warning that the girl will not back down from the election. Thinking she's a mafia boss, Kaguya calls the shorty to the council and tries to pull a blatant bribe, promising victory next year if she drops out now. But Ino won't yield to the bourgeoisie, accusing the two of being dirty and corrupt, and spitting out that they were definitely made for each other. The mere romantic insinuation melts Kaguya's last functional brain cell, causing her to get completely lost in her own fantasy and fail pathetically at eliminating the competition. Election day has arrived, and Ishigami wants Miko crushed at the polls, not out of malice, but because the girl has such pathetic stage fright that she always freezes up and becomes the laughingstock of the whole school, leaving our depressed emo inexplicably irritated. While Kaguya uses visual manipulation to hypnotize the student simps with a perfect speech, Miko's turn comes up. As predicted, she freezes at the podium, sweating cold bullets exactly like you trying to talk to someone attractive. Seeing the disaster, our proud president plays the hero. Miyuki interrupts the awkward silence and initiates an aggressive debate, forcing the girl to focus only on him and forget the crowd of vultures. The verbal duel drags on. Miyuki wins the election by a razor-thin margin, but Miko finally gets pats on the back from the crowd and regains her confidence. Backstage, Hayasaka tries to comfort Kaguya, but when the chaotic secretary pops up out of nowhere, the maid panics and shoves her boss to the floor. Chika deduces that Kaguya is suffering from severe intestinal issues and drags the poor girl to the infirmary. Far away, Miyuki offers Miko a spot on the new council. Chika and Ishigami eavesdrop behind the door, terrified of impending unemployment for having completely dysfunctional personalities, but Miyuki simply summons the two and orders the useless pair to carry chairs. In the infirmary, Kaguya throws an epic tantrum under the covers, whining that Miyuki only used her body to get elected and then discarded her. But when the president enters the room, the ninja maid jumps out the window.
Why don't you go ahead and tell him face to face?
Shinomiya, how are you feeling? Sorry.
Miyuki sits on the edge of the bed, apologizing for throwing Kaguya's perfect plan in the trash just to save his rival. He confesses that without Kaguya around, he's a complete failure, incapable of accomplishing anything, begging her to fill the vice president spot once again. Internally destroyed and incapable of formulating a coherent sentence, Kaguya just raises a trembling hand from under the blanket and makes an OK sign with her fingers, allowing Miyuki to run off full of joy to form the new and bizarre student council lineup. The student council catches Ishigami showing off his beautiful tighty-whities in the middle of the room, with the treasurer defending with his life that boxer shorts are the official uniform of a cheap gigolo. Kaguya absorbs this useless information and immediately wants to find out if the president hides his tool in sleazy boxers. She tries to casually ask about underwear, but Miyuki's overheated brain interprets this as her wanting to know what kind of panties he prefers to see on her body. In a desperate attempt not to sound like a disgusting pervert just like you, he describes a very tight and thin fabric. Kaguya misunderstands everything, is certain he's the king of the strip club, and Miko Ino pops up at the door right as the heiress calls him a gigolo. To make matters worse, Miyuki screams at the top of his lungs that he loves black panties, making Miko vanishing from the spot. To make up for the misunderstanding, Kaguya offers the president a hand massage. It's all part of her maid's bizarre plan that squeezing someone else's flesh releases love hormones and prevents getting cheated on in the future. Miyuki accepts just for the chance to be touched, but Kaguya has the delicacy of a runaway tractor. She crushes the poor guy's bones, releasing a tsunami of stress in him while she drowns in in pure lust. Miko enters the room again, sees Kaguya taking care of Miyuki on the couch in an extremely questionable position, and runs away traumatized when the vice president casually asks if she wants to join the fun. Later, Miyuki decides to force Kaguya to read a depressing shoujo manga that made him and his sister bawl their eyes out, hoping this will make the girl confess her love. He and Ishigami are already melting over the story, but Chika walks in and ruins the plan by spitting out the universe's biggest spoiler about the protagonist's death. Miyuki and Ishigami gag the secretary with duct tape, creating a scene worthy of an amateur hostage situation right as Miko opens the door and runs for her life for the third time that day. After reading the masterpiece, Kaguya fries her own brain with shoujo heroine syndrome, seeing any idiot around as a soap opera heartthrob. She leaves aquarium tickets lying around on the desk, sparking an animal trivia war between Miyuki and Ishigami. The president snatches the tickets and escorts a fever-red Kaguya to the infirmary, trying to drop the invitation on the way, but the girl is so hallucinating on hormones that she rejects him by philosophizing that the hallway itself is an aquarium. As punishment for this completely schizophrenic line, Miyuki ends his weekend on a romantic date at the aquarium, admiring fish right next to Ishigami. Injecting chaos straight into the veins, the strict public morals enforcer Miko makes herself sick from complaining so much, prompting the chaotic secretary Chika to try some shock therapy. The challenge is simple. Miko needs to watch live rule infractions without throwing a fit, but the depressive Ishigami doesn't help at all and decides to obliterate the girl's patience by eating snacks, pulling out a handheld console, and then hooking the damn thing straight into the student council's TV to play with the president. Since Miko idolizes Chika, she swallows her tears and agrees to commit the heinous crime of taking Instagram-filtered selfies with Kaguya. The vice president tries to make an ugly face to look cute and fails miserably, while Miko discovers that proving the dangers of social media is the absolute peak of her rebellion. Fate then locks Kaguya and Miyuki inside a PE equipment room thanks to a useless twig wedged in the door. The two gifted idiots are absolutely certain the other planned this romantic kidnapping and decide it's finally time to swap spit. But since neither of them knows what to do with their own mouths, they break into a cold sweat and freeze up. And guess who decides to open the door right at the climax? Miko, obviously.
Jeez, how long does it take to check equipment?
In a total panic, Kaguya runs crying into the freshman's arms, making the president look like a total creep. Karma hits so fast that Kaguya is rushed to the hospital with absurd palpitations. Thinking she's going to kick the bucket from a terminal illness, the world-renowned cardiologist examines the patient only to discover that the near heart attack was caused by Miyuki pulling a simple piece of lint out of her hair. The doctor delivers the humiliating diagnosis of pure lovesickness. But Kaguya goes into absolute denial, demands 1,000 unnecessary tests, and arrogantly cuts the old man off when he tries to talk about his own romantic past. While poor Hayasaka suffers from severe secondhand embarrassment in the corner of the room, Kaguya leaves with her heart physically intact, but her pride so crushed that she'd rather hide from Miyuki that a tiny touch from him made her entire system short-circuit. Our delusional champion of justice, Miko, cries her eyes out to her friend Kobachi, acting like a tragic heroine trapped in an asylum full of perverts and tyrants. Kobachi gives it to her straight, saying Miko has an overactive imagination and is just twisting reality. Miko processes this information and draws the dumbest conclusion possible, deciding that Kaguya is the true antichrist of the student council, plotting to steal Miyuki's presidency. Miko confronts the vice president to demand explanations about her feelings for the president, but Kaguya gives such an unexpected reaction that the freshman leaves completely humiliated, losing the mental battle before it even begins. Meanwhile, Kaguya keeps avoiding Miyuki like the plague to try and hide her lovesickness. She invents a pathetic routine of touching her left cheek with her right hand to fake a shred of sanity. But when Miyuki grabs that exact right hand demanding to know why he's being ignored, the heiress's brain collapses. Out of pure savage instinct to get her hand back, Kaguya unleashes a brutal martial arts throw, slamming the president into the ground with such violence that the screen even simulates VR fighting game graphics. She finally manages to touch her cheek in peace, at least until reality hits, and she realizes she nearly pulverized her future husband's spine. To cap off the cringe quota, the depressive Ishigami decides to become a functional teenager and joins the cheer squad, bitterly regretting it upon his first contact with extroverted human beings. The big problem is that the event rules dictate a gender swap, forcing him to hunt down a borrowed girl's uniform. Defying all expectations, Kaguya volunteers her own uniform for the treasurer to wear. However, the guy has the nerve to complain about Kaguya's uniform. As immediate revenge, the heiress sabotages his face with bizarre makeup. Miyuki stews in the corner, boiling with jealousy over the excessive physical contact between the two. But the award for best reaction goes to Miko, who sees Ishigami dressed as a schoolgirl and shows ice-cold indifference, simply accepting that this is the exact rock bottom where he belongs. Miyuki is drowning in the purest depression because Kaguya is avoiding him like the plague. Confined to his natural habitat without maternal supervision, he receives the worst possible love advice from his chronically unemployed father. Seeing the pathetic creature her brother has become, the rebellious Kei swallows her teenage angst to comfort the poor guy. But the next day, Kaguya simply uses a routine to calm her nerves, goes back to talking to him normally, and the needy blonde realizes he suffered a mental breakdown over absolutely nothing. Determined to torture everyone's eyes, Miyuki tries to learn the Soran dance for the sports festival, but his rusty robot moves make Chika quit tutoring him in record time. This opens the door for Kaguya to become his teacher, whose sole pedagogical goal is to grab and knead the president's muscles using a purely mechanical teaching method.
You know, I'm no expert, but I can give you some pointers. And I get to touch him. Now, puff out your chest and take your hips and lower them down like this. It looks
Chika turns green with envy. The two girls get into a savage catfight, and as Miyuki struggles to escape this feminine tug-of-war, he breaks the laws of physics and accidentally executes the perfect dance moves. Far from this clown show, Ishigami's dark past comes to light. Kobachi reveals that in middle school, the emo treasurer was accused of stalking a girl and beating the crap out of her boyfriend, getting cancelled by the entire school. The one who saved his skin was the pocket-sized champion of justice, Miko, who went head-to-head with the principal, while Ishigami himself chased away the girl's bullies from the shadows without her knowing. At the sports festival, Miyuki's dad resurfaces to humiliate his son in public. The old master of manipulation intercepts Kaguya, recognizes her voice from last summer, and pokes at the rich girl's ego until she confesses that Miyuki and the student council saved her faith in humanity. When she realizes she just poured her heart out to her future father-in-law, her soul simply leaves her body. While Miyuki runs over to yell at his dad, Ishigami and Kazeno win the three-legged race, and the emo finally flashes a genuine smile, completely unaware that the mystery girl from his criminal past is watching it all from afar, like a ghost. Ishigami wins the three-legged race and thinks he's finally winning at life, but the illusion lasts less than a minimum wage paycheck in Miyuki's pocket. Kyoko Otomo, the central girl from his dark past, spawns out of nowhere just to rub in his face how pathetic it is for him to try and be happy. This throws our emo treasurer straight into the pit of depression, just in time for the big guy Kazeno to conveniently get injured and dump the burden of running the relay race onto Ishigami. While the bleachers whisper poison, his mind travels back to middle school, proving that he was never some weird stalker, but rather an anti-social vigilante. Kyoko was just a kind classmate, but her boyfriend, a wannabe soap opera villain named Ogino, was collecting side chicks. When confronted, Ogino tries to buy Ishigami's silence by offering spicy pics and dirty recordings of his own girlfriend, proving he's radioactive trash. Ishigami's response was the only reasonable one, beating the kid's face to a pulp until his mug was completely wrecked. The problem is that Kyoko walked in on the scene, and the cowardly Ogino made up on the spot that he got beat up because Ishigami had a sick jealousy over her. To protect the girl's innocence, Ishigami donned the villain's cape and accepted his exile from society. He was rotting away in a dark room until Miyuki kicked the door down with student council reports. They investigated everything, found out that Ogino chickened out, broke up with her, and ran away without spreading rumors, meaning Ishigami's suicide mission was actually a success. When Miyuki tells him he's not crazy, the goth breaks down in tears. Using trauma as fuel in the present, Ishigami mentally tells the delusional Kyoko to go to hell and runs terrifyingly fast. He loses the race by a hair, but is welcomed with sweaty hugs from the cheer squad, discovering that normal people are actually kind of acceptable. At the school exit, Kyoko regrets not running into her abusive ex, completely unaware that Kaguya and Hayasaka arranged a strategic mafia-style disappearance to ship Ogino off to another school. The girl walks away smiling for having humiliated Ishigami, while Kaguya watches from afar, knowing that this clueless smile was exactly what our Bang sporting hero swore to protect. The school principal decides to turn the student council into pamphlet models. However, since Kaguya is the heiress to a powerful conglomerate and can't have her face plastered everywhere, she sits out the photo shoot. When the group heads to the roof for a private photo, Kaguya tries to hand her prehistoric cell phone to the principal to snap the picture. Unfortunately, the wind decides to cosplay as a hurricane, blowing the device right off the edge. The flip phone smashes against the concrete below. Instantly wiping out absolutely all of the rich girl's digital memories. At the repair shop, Kaguya and her maid, Hayasaka, get the news that the technological fossil has crossed the Rainbow Bridge. The heiress then buys a brand new smartphone and immediately goes around shoving her line QR code in President Miyuki's face. Seeing that Kaguya is still more depressed than you on a Monday morning over the lost photos, Miyuki creates a group chat and gets everyone to flood the app with their old pictures. With her new gallery fully restored, Kaguya finally smiles again, and they take their group photo at last. But the peace lasts exactly 0 seconds, because the chaotic secretary Chika spawns from hell with a giant balloon pumping game, where whoever pops it loses. Miyuki and Kaguya try to maintain their facade as unshakable intellectuals, but fail miserably. Meanwhile, the depressive treasurer, Ishigami, tosses all his hard-earned courage from the sports festival straight into the trash, trembling in fear at a round piece of rubber. Kaguya resorts to dirty tactics, offering Chika some oranges, fully aware that the acidic juice would thin out the rubber, but the plan goes south. The naive Ino gets manipulated into pumping the balloon to the very limits of elastic physics. In desperation, Kaguya tries to shoot a paper dart weighed down by a mechanical pencil tip at the balloon, but ends up hitting Ino instead. Seeing the heiress panic, Miyuki has a dramatic flashback of his father telling him to be a protective man, but the president shamelessly chickens out and dodges all responsibility. The moment they switch places, Chika decides to peel the damn orange. The juice squirts, the rubber melts, and the balloon explodes with the force of a nuclear warhead, reducing the academy to rubble in a stupidly exaggerated sequence of destruction. And there sit Kaguya and Miyuki in the dust, continuing their endless psychological mind games while the student council photo glows on the phone screen. Miyuki flashes smug little smirks, imagining a blushing Kaguya begging for his attention, while she tilts her head under dramatic lighting, playing the innocent maiden ready to devour his soul. All of this just to hide the fact that they are two emotional cowards with the maturity level of a single-celled amoeba. Their daily duel breaks down into 4 exhausting psychological battles, where neither manages to overpower the other, and the victories are evenly split. But just as the tension hits its boiling point, both of their diabolical plans go straight down the drain, thanks to a walking natural disaster. Chika, the secretary with a brain smoother than a bowling ball, happily breezes into the room and stomps all over their mental strategies, completely oblivious to the chaos she's causing. Chika's bizarre meddling leaves Kaguya in a state of shock and Miyuki scrambling to keep his composure, completely shattering their aura of invincibility. In the end, the secretary's sweet, clueless interference only serves to expose the truth. These great master strategists are nothing but 2 stubborn blockheads willing to endure any humiliation, except swallowing their own pride to relieve the pent-up tension they feel for each other. Our dysfunctional student council decides that the best way to cure the toxic tension between Ishigami and Ino is to force them to spew compliments at each other. Surprisingly, our resident emo manages to list her good qualities without much effort, but when it's Ino's turn to return the favor, her brain short-circuits. She can't think of a single thing, tanking the mission with the charisma of a doorknob.
Okay, so what I like about you is I can't think of a single good point.
You're pumping out the press, so get over yourself.
To make the absurd humiliation even worse, Ishigami tries to clean her hair with the exact delicacy of a sweaty mechanic changing the oil on a blown-out Chevy. Meanwhile, our beloved blonde president finds himself trapped in a dimension of terror known as karaoke, breaking into a cold sweat because he is absolutely useless with a mic in his hand. Since Kaguya is the devil incarnate and refuses to miss an opportunity to strike, she decides to make his life a living hell by sending Hayasaka into the room room. Taking advantage of the fact that Miyuki had rejected her in the past, the sadistic maid plays the role of the heartbroken victim and starts belting out an overly dramatic breakup anthem just to twist the knife. The poor guy tries to play the philosopher, arguing that people should show their true selves, which is hilarious coming from a guy who spends 24 hours a day faking his own perfection to impress his rich crush. Hayasaka throws this hypocrisy right back in his face, forcing the blonde to confront his own existential fraudulence. Outside, puppet master Kaguya sneezes right through her pathetic stalker disguise consisting of sunglasses and a surgical mask. When she listens through the door and mistakes the sounds of a failed rap rhyme for explicit moaning, her jealousy explodes. She freaks out, throws her disguise on the floor, and starts screaming like a lunatic, letting all her humiliation get recorded in glorious 4K by the hallway security camera. Even Chika tries to show up at the karaoke joint to enjoy her day, but when her radar goes off, warning her that the president is singing again, she suffers a PTSD breakdown, gasps for air, and flees to try and save whatever is left of her sanity. At the end of this chaotic mess, Kaguya and her slave disguised as a maid finally share a moment of peace. They end up sporting the exact same hairstyle to prove to the world that even though Kaguya loves throwing Hayasaka to the lions without a second thought, deep down the two are exactly alike and consider themselves true soul sisters. Nagisa is freaking out, thinking her phony boyfriend is sheathing his sword somewhere else because he's been hanging out with Maki, the Academy's official romantic loser. Kaguya immediately boards the paranoia train, causing Miko's sanity to melt like a popsicle on hot asphalt. Miko tries to be the voice of reason at the table, until she finds out the two accused went to karaoke, the magical place where teenagers lock themselves in to bump uglies. But the grand crime of betrayal was just the boy picking out an absurdly cheap heart necklace for their anniversary. All the girls present, including the chaos demon Chika, think the jewelry is a pitiful, tacky monstrosity. However, the paranoid girlfriend Nagisa eats the gift up and gushes with emotion. Meanwhile, the supposed mistress Maki reveals herself to be nothing but a bootleg Kaguya, a charmless background character who has been suffering for months over a guy who's already taken. She goes to whine for advice at the student council, and Ishigami, the supreme expert in depression, ruthlessly obliterates the girl's sundered defenses. He explains in excruciating detail the tragic humiliation of being the second choice when it comes to receiving someone's love cream. But in the end, he and Miyuki convince the poor girl to at least try to confess. On her way out, Maki throws it in Miyuki's face that he's only helping because she reminds him of Kaguya, nearly exposing the president's pathetic and repressed fetish. To turn the room into an absolute hellscape, Chika summons a 10-yen coin truth game and a bogus lie detector, purely for the sadistic pleasure of psychologically torturing her own friends. Ishigami uses his turn to ask if anyone secretly hates him, and cries warm tears of joy upon discovering that only one person actually wants to see him in a coffin. Miko, on the other hand, desperately asks if they need her there, and when no one says no, she has a validation orgasm, prompting Ishigami to warn her that she is so needy she'd be eaten alive by any corner store scammer.
There isn't a single person here who feels like they don't need you.
You should steer clear of group dates and host clubs. You're an easy target.
Kaguya and Miyuki try to use the machine to pry romantic confessions out of each other and fail miserably for the 1000th time, exactly like you trying to flirt. During cleanup, Miyuki swears up and down that he's never done anything dirty at a karaoke joint, and Kaguya pretends not to care while secretly sighing in relief. Yu Ishigami, our favorite depressed treasurer, makes the fatal mistake of falling for someone 100 levels above his combat power. The target is Tsubame, the vice captain of the cheer squad who breathes popularity, while all he has is insecurity and a questionable emo haircut. Since misery loves company, Kaguya drags this confession out of the boy and decides to become his relationship coach, drawing purely on her own family trauma. She decrees that women are only attracted to power, ordering Ishigami to crack the top 50 in the exams to earn any kind of leverage. Fortunately, Kaguya has the common sense to veto his psychopathic romantic plans, which involved stalking the girl with daily flowers and handing her a half-empty photo album begging her to fill it. Motivated by the alien fact that Kaguya actually has hope for his existence, Ishigami studies until his retinas nearly fry. The results come in, and he swallows a glorious ranking in the 150s. He is so crushed by the failure that he almost weeps blood out of pure self-loathing, but Kaguya corners the poor guy and makes him swear he'll give it his soul next time, promising to work him to the bone in their study sessions. Meanwhile, Miyuki celebrates taking first place again, punching the air like a madman with no enemies. Later, the chaos relocates when Chika Chika crashes the mansion for a slumber party and bumps into Mr. Herthaka, who is nothing more than Hayasaka disguised as a butler with a dark fanfic tier backstory. During a late-night video call with a heavily sleep-deprived Miyuki, Chika puts the wrong pieces together in her peanut brain and deduces that Miyuki and the butler Herthaka are living a forbidden romance, triggering a nosebleed that gushes like a fire hose. Kaguya, fighting her own chronic exhaustion, almost vomits a love confession into Miyuki's face through the screen, but crashes mid-sentence like Windows 95, leaving her courage in the drawer once again. Miyuki decides the best way to express himself is by committing a crime against music and trying to rap to settle the karaoke beef with Hayasaka. The student council president seeks Chika's help, which is a colossal mistake since she knows about as much about hip-hop as you know about flirting. She actually has to learn how to rhyme before she can teach the blonde disaster. When Miyuki finally opens his mouth to drop some bars, the sound that comes out resembles a slowly agonizing walrus, creating a vocal shockwave so bizarre that it physically launches the chaotic secretary into the air. Defying all laws of physics and common sense, the musical nightmare evolves into a highly produced, psychedelic music video. Miyuki fires off old-school rhymes in an attempt to convince Hayasaka to stop lying to herself. The maid, who has already confessed that her job is literally to spy on Kaguya, fires back, unleashing her flow. She vents all her pent-up frustration, dropping heavy bars about having so many fake personas that she feels like a literal hydra. And in the middle of this collective fever dream, Kaguya jumps into the cipher with a surreal performance that even throws in a random Bohemian Rhapsody reference, proving that sanity abandoned this school a long time ago. When the musical secondhand embarrassment finally ends, the scene shifts to Maki indulging in her favorite sport, being miserable in love. She goes to vent to Miyuki and Ishigami, forming the holy trinity of love-struck idiots who can't confess to anyone. Ishigami drops a golden nugget of wisdom, stating that in the game of love, you have to be quick on the draw. The cosmic irony of this phrase almost causes the room to collapse, considering all three cowards there have their own romances completely dead in the water. Maki's romantic regret is so absurdly hot that her sheer rage literally boils the tea in her cup. And just imagining some random NPC stealing their respective crushes nearly gives Miyuki and Ishigami a simultaneous brain aneurysm, proving their brains are just as fragile as the gigantic egos keeping them from confessing. It's time for parent-teacher conferences, that teenage anxiety meat grinder that every student hates. Obviously, Kaguya's garbage father, a fossilized old man fueled purely by greed and rot, doesn't even show his face at the school. The one who pulls a double shift and signs for the girl is Hayasaka's mother, revealing that the cold, calculating maid is actually a needy little girl who loves to fawn over her mommy during the rare moments they see each other. Miyuki's weirdo dad also shows up to spread his usual chaos, but the real gut punch comes from the president himself during the meeting. Miyuki drops the bomb that he's packing his bags to leave the country and study at Stanford. The virginity clock starts ticking violently, proving that playtime and psychological warfare in the student council are coming to an end, and he needs to act fast if he wants to sink his sword into Kaguya before the deadline expires. But instead of using basic mating instincts, the two waste time frying their last remaining neurons in an absurd mental gymnastics routine just to try and invite each other to another school's cultural festival. Unsurprisingly, they fail miserably, exactly like you trying to ask someone out. Desperate for validation, Miyuki begs the girls on the council to objectively evaluate his personality. Miko short-circuits and almost has a stroke, thinking the president is asking her out. Once she snaps out of her delusion, Miko and Chika waste no time busting out the heavy artillery, roasting the guy without an ounce of mercy. However, Kaguya, completely blinded by love and dying to swallow the president whole, can't find a single flaw and spits out compliments until his ego inflates back into the stratosphere. With his confidence recharged and knowing the countdown has begun, Miyuki goes back to focusing on his master plan to finally pop this bubble of tension. We are thrown into the cultural festival committee of this snobby rich kid school, where our problematic duo, Miko and Ishigami, have to plan the event. Miko is absurdly obsessed with building a gigantic bonfire for reasons only a psychiatrist could explain, while Ishigami is there purely to try to impress Tsubame and maybe score. After a bunch of needy boys suggest pathetic slogans, Miko is almost chewed out by a background character named Rei, but miraculously grows a spine to put her foot down and approve her pyromaniac project with the help of our depressed treasurer. We cut to two professional stalkers disguised as as journalists Karen and Erika, who spend the entire day annoying everyone. They interview Tsubame doing unnecessary acrobatics and then listen to the president talk about a stupid tradition of hanging a giant papier-mâché ball from the school ceiling. But when these delusional girls finally interview Kaguya, they lose what few brain cells they had left, worshipping the vice president as an immaculate goddess and completely ignoring the manipulative psychopath she really is. All just because the girl was chosen to shoot a flaming arrow into the bonfire. They also bump into Chika's tabletop game club, where some weirdo starts ranting like a generic anime villain planning a bloody death game. And keeping up his tradition of being physically useless, the president decides to fail miserably at tying balloon animals for the decorations. He collapses on the floor whining like a worm, nearly triggering Chika's abusive maternal instinct, but flees to train in the council room. The blonde spends hours popping rubber in Kaguya's face, who suffers in silence, fighting off a heart attack with every explosion. Amidst the president's existential crisis about his own mediocrity, Kaguya gives the most genuine smile of her life, finding this constant humiliation absolutely charming. Convinced the old balloons were the problem, our protagonist tries playing with new ones, only to immediately pop everything in sight, proving his lack of motor skills is a chronic condition, while Chika curses her own existence watching the scene, completely ignoring the fact that our beloved president has the fashion sense of a blind thrift store scarecrow. The cultural festival finally embraces its true purpose, forcing couples to hook up. Tsubame decides to traumatize the crowd with the event's bizarre legend, detailing how a historic simp literally ripped out his own heart to make a twisted bandage for a sick princess. Our bourgeois protagonist tries to play the skeptical intellectual, calling it government propaganda, but her veneer of superiority melts instantly when Tsubame reveals the part that actually matters. Gifting a heart-shaped object at the festival guarantees eternal love. Suddenly transformed into a superstitious fanatic, Kaguya starts frying her final brain cells trying to figure out a way to shove a heart shape onto the president without looking completely desperate for his academic shaft.
No, I can't, I mustn't! That's the same thing as an outright confession, and that is never going to happen!
She brainstorms the most schizophrenic plans imaginable until the impossible happens. In a rare moment of lucidity that threatens to destroy the entire premise of the anime, our proud heiress looks Hayasaka dead in the eye and finally admits, loud and clear, that she wants Miyuki's body. The maid almost has a shock-induced aneurysm seeing her boss drop years of posturing, but Kaguya is still a hostage to her own family trauma and embarrassingly chickens out when it's time to pounce. Meanwhile, our pet emo receives the best news of his miserable life, discovering that Tsubame is officially single and on the market. Knowing that the girl is going to graduate and disappear forever, Ishigami realizes his time to taste the sweet nectar of victory is running out. He decides he's going to ask the cheer captain out to the festival, preferring to risk a humiliating rejection rather than live with regrets like a coward. Seeing the depressed gamer finally muster the courage to take action, lights a fire in Kaguya's frozen chest, proving that even the most damaged guy in school has more game than the two protagonists combined. We are thrown into a flashback where a bitter, poor, and exhausted Miyuki hates all the disgusting rich kids at the school, proving he was exactly like you in high school. The former student council president, a stylish androgynous guy, tries to recruit our bottle blonde, claiming the school needs the clinical eye of a peasant. While Miyuki is rubbing his fingers on an expensive teacup, doubting the offer, he is immediately enslaved to clean a filthy, muddy pond on campus. Suddenly, a background character falls into the deep water and starts drowning. While all the useless bourgeois students panic and do nothing, Kaguya dives into the wet hole without hesitation and rescues the girl. Seeing Kaguya dripping wet and acting absolutely heroic, Miyuki feels something hard thumping in his chest and falls in love instantly. Of course, the sociopathic heiress tells Hayasaka she only saved the girl to collect favors from her tycoon father in the future, doing that basic mental gymnastics to hide any shred of empathy. Back in the chaotic present of the festival, Kaguya is dressed in period clothing at her class's cosplay cafe, while Hayasaka pulls off an incredible cosplay of herself as a maid. The legendary ramen guys appear out of nowhere, humiliate Kaguya's technique for pouring hot liquids, and idolize Hayasaka. Fueled by an ego trip, Kaguya serves a tea so masterful that the ramen elder screams for everyone to hear that she has spent years training her wrist to satisfy one specific man. This leaves Kaguya sweating with embarrassment, especially since Miyuki was standing right next to her. On their way out, the ramen master warns our clueless president that he is the chosen one, but his virgin brain fails to process the information. In another corner, Maki continues to radiate the aura of a miserable kukin while advising Ishigami to invite Tsubame to the haunted house attraction. After being forced to look at a happy couple and getting the creeps from his sinister female friend, our favorite depressive finally gathers his courage, approaches the cheer captain, and pops the question. To the absolute surprise of everyone, she says yes, leaving Ishigami wagging his tail like a puppy that just got a treat, ready to step into a dark, tight space with the girl of his dreams.
I heard that scary stuff is up your alley. So if you wanna...
I'd love to go! You're on your...
Kaguya and her bootleg counterpart Maki are screaming like cowardly chickens inside the festival's haunted house. It's all thanks to the immersive 3D audio that only exists because they used poor Miko as a guinea pig, ringing out highly questionable noises and reactions from her that would make any anime fan sweat out of context. But Miko herself activates her elementary school dictator morality upon catching a couple eating each other's faces in the dark of the attraction, deciding out of pure spite to separate the line into boys and girls. This completely wrecks Ishigami's plan to confess in the pitch dark, forcing our depressed treasurer to improvise. He goes to a cafe, wins a gigantic heart-shaped cookie, and hands it to Tsubame purely out of politeness. The tragic detail is that this idiot is part of the 10% of the school that ignores the legend that giving a heart means eternal love. The girl turns into a radioactive tomato, freaks out in front of 30 people, screams that she needs time to think, and bolts. Ishigami accidentally stars in the most humiliating confession in history, his spine practically melting out of sheer cringe. While Miyuki prays the kid succeeds so he can use him as a guinea pig for his own confession, Chika uses some napkin math to calculate Ishigami's odds and realizes the bizarre miracle of love is statistically possible. Out of nowhere, Chika's sadistic sister shows up on the scene, drooling over the president's corpse-like eye bags. Kaguya readies her killer aura to eliminate the rival, but realizes the two share the exact same weird fetish, and they start worshipping the blonde's zombie eyes together. Chika tries to sabotage the crush by forcing Miyuki to juggle, expecting a total motor skill disaster, but by the cosmic laws of comedy, he masters the art and becomes an instant circus god, leaving the girl even more obsessed. And amidst this teenage asylum, some needy kleptomaniac steals all the heart balloons from the festival, kicking off the romantic crime of the century. Miyuki's clock is ticking faster than his dignity, as the president has finally been accepted to Stanford and is going to ditch this snobby rich school a year early. Knowing he needs to take his shot before the target flees the country, he takes over the festival's balloon tying booth. Kaguya approaches, drooling for a heart-shaped balloon, but since this girl's pride is the size of Mount Everest, she invents a lunatic list of constraints, even arguing that flowers are animals just to force the president to give her exactly what she wants. But when she finds out the heart shape doesn't cost money and can only be paid for with true love, the rich girl panics, slams a wad of cash on the table like she just paid for a male escort, and flees in a cold sweat. Mid-escape, she bumps into Tsubame, who is racking her brain trying to figure out how to reject Ishigami's accidental confession without pulverizing the boy's soul. Kaguya, operating with her diabolical soap opera villain mind, assumes the conversation is about some random rival and nearly convinces the cheer captain to crush the poor guy in the worst way possible. After spying on Chika rejecting some random simp by forcing the lunatic to take a quiz, we see Miko almost get kidnapped by two NPCs, since she has the situational awareness of a French fry, forcing Ishigami to save the day by dropping a paper fan on her empty head. Fed up with wasting time, Miyuki corners Kaguya and drags her around the festival. When she tries to use reverse psychology, asking if people won't think it's a date, the president simply adopts an alpha male stance and tells her to let them think what they want. He pulls her into a fortune-telling tent where a psychic dressed as a witch starts badgering the two, predicting their future marriage and calling Kaguya pure water that molds to any container. They spend the rest of the day dodging their useless friends like Neo dodging bullets in the Matrix, sparks, with Miko getting sucked into a random soba eating contest out of nowhere. Kaguya is already smiling, thinking her romantic victory is in the bag, right up until Miyuki looks deep into her eyes and drops the nuclear bomb that he is bailing for Stanford, completely shattering the girl's perfect little world, while Chika continues playing detective, trying to find the phantom thief who stole all the event's balloons.
The one person I had to tell. This culture festival is my last.
Our corporate heiress literally turns to stone and crumbles alongside her sanity when she finds out our favorite wage-slave blonde is bouncing to Stanford University a year early, completely destroying Kaguya's plan to lock the boy down in a normal relationship. Desperate, she runs to cry on Hayasaka's shoulder, who is beyond sick of carrying this girl's meltdowns on her back. After trashing all of her boss's pathetic confession ideas, ranging from cheerleading tutorials to dead memes, the maid drops the hard truth, telling her there are no shortcuts and she needs to swallow her pride and spit it out if she wants the guy. While the rich girl hunts down her target through the festival, we see that our edgy emo Ishigami is still operating on airplane mode. He remains completely oblivious to the fact that giving a heart cookie to Tsubame was interpreted by the entire school as a direct mating request. The girl asks until March to give the poor guy an answer, and he accepts out of pure innocence. Later, he almost figures out how badly he screwed up while watching a play about the legend of the passionate hearts, but as soon as Tsubame appears on stage, his only functional brain cell shuts down and he gives up on thinking entirely. Back at the main event, Kaguya is about to shoot a flaming arrow into the bonfire when someone named Phantom Thief Arsene steals the festival's jewel. Chika immediately tries to play detective and fails miserably, making up clues in her own empty head. But when a useless background character points out that the calling cards left by the thief are fireproof, Kaguya smells the scent of an over-prepared virgin from a mile away and realizes the whole circus is the president's doing. Miyuki then activates a plan bordering on romantic psychopathy, popping a giant balloon that vomits hundreds of heart balloons into the air, using the heat from the bonfire to spread aerial chaos just to show off and try to pull a confession out of her. As if that weren't enough, he drops the ultimate bomb, asking her to drop everything and run away with him to the United States, throwing her entire repressed upbringing in the trash. Kaguya accepts on the spot, and the two finally end this Cold War of egos by swapping spit at the top of the clock tower, surrounded by floating hearts. In some dark corner of the festival, Ishigami finds the rule enforcer Miko Ino completely alone and hands her the plastic heart from the lost and found, paving the way for yet another brilliant romantic disaster in the future. Meanwhile, the next morning, Kaguya mentally regresses into a cute, infantile version of herself just to cope with the absolute shock of losing her first kiss virginity.